and we welcome you to episode 32 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Rich Griffin is here, coming to you from beautiful, lovely Oakville, Ontario, Canada. I'm Scott MacArthur in beautiful, lovely Halifax, Nova Scotia. Although, tie your hair back today, we're getting 100-kilometer-an-hour winds. So after all the hot air that blew across our country late last week, Griff, we are now getting a legit windstorm here in the Maritimes.
How's that? It's pretty windy here too in southern Ontario, but how's it going to affect your drive? You're leaving to drive home and you're going to be driving into the wind. Is that going to add time to your travel plans?
I have no idea how it's going to affect my drive, Griff, but I've got this crazy app to show you. It's a drive tracker, and I'll give you my license plate, my VIN number, and my coordinates, and you can track my drive home.
Well,
and tweet about it if you want.
Debbie does that with all our kids when they go on a trip anywhere, when they fly somewhere. She's got that flight tracker going, and I didn't know how valuable it could be until we started tracking supposed journey of Shohei Ohtani. But
right, so it's a great app. It's a great app. There's no question about it. So this episode, typically Griff and I will bullet point 6, 7, 8 things and maybe get to all of them and maybe not, but we'll have a general sense of where we want to take the hour or so that we get to spend with you. Today, there are really no bullet points. It's Shohei Ohtani, and it's really just going to be a conversation here, Griff, because a lot went down over the course of last week, and it ultimately ended in heartbreak and disappointment for Toronto Blue Jays fans when we learned that Shohei Ohtani on Saturday had decided and announced through an Instagram post that he would be joining the LA Dodgers for the next 10 years at a whopping, this number, I hadn't heard anybody discuss this number. We'd heard 500 to 600 million. 600 was probably tops that we had heard. $700 million.
When the Blue Jays indicate that they're in the ballpark, it had to be more than 600 million, because you don't just take a leap of 100 million and add that and say you were close. So if the Jays were, say, in at 650, and that's what forced the Dodgers to go to 7, and we can get into later how they're going to structure it so that it doesn't show up front on a 70 million per year basis. But when we heard that the Blue Jays were in the ballpark, and say it was 650, the thing about the Blue Jays offer and negotiations is that they have analysts within Rogers who understood that you can make a lot of money marketing in Asia, selling your product in Asia of communications and streaming and whatever. And so it was never going to cost the ball club 650. You could cut that in half maybe, which means that fans expecting them to invest the 650 back into payroll are going to be very disappointed, because I don't think they can do that. I don't think that was ever the plan. I think it was Ohtani or bust in terms of that money that was pinpointed. It was pinpointed specifically for one thing, and that would be Shohei Ohtani and his marketing opportunities and the fact that he's the best baseball player in the world.
Right. I mean, he's such a unique baseball player, such a unique athlete. And I hate talking about a human being as a brand, but I mean, he is such a unique branding and marketing opportunity. With due respect to some of the other names we've talked about in the last 6 weeks or so of this podcast, Griff, Cody Bellinger, Michael A. Taylor, and Bellinger's a better player than Taylor, but there just isn't, unless Cody Bellinger has a foothold in Nagasaki that neither you nor I are aware of, there's just no opportunity with any other player. And this is literally a unique athlete who doesn't come along once in a generation. He comes along once in a lifetime, once in a century, once and even longer than that. I've even argued, Griff, and I know that Ohtani's not going to pitch in 2024 with his elbow issues, but I would even argue, because we often compare him to Babe Ruth, I'm not going to sit here and say he's better than Babe Ruth. I'm not going to sit here and say he's worse than Babe Ruth, but I would offer that he is different than Babe Ruth, because once Babe Ruth got to the New York Yankees in 1920, I think it was, he stopped pitching.
Yeah.
Babe Ruth became an outfielder, right? And so, or an everyday outfielder.
The comparison is difficult to make because of the training methods that make athletes better athletes today in every sport than they were back then. But the one stat that stands up is that Babe Ruth one season hit more home runs than the entire rest of the American League combined. And you're not going to see Ohtani do that. So everything's got to be related to a specific point in time. Babe Ruth was the greatest of his era. And since this is the most recent era and Ohtani is the best of this era, then you could say he's the best athlete to ever play the game of baseball.
So he's an LA Dodger. He's not a Toronto Blue Jay, and fans are heartbroken, at least the online portion of the fan base. And by that, I mean the ones who are really active on social media and are in that community. I think there was probably larger traffic as last week went on, because people were tracking flights and people were logging on, pulling up the Twitter app on their phone, looking for the latest information, probably checking every 5 to 10 minutes. They wanted to be in the know if Ohtani made a decision. And a confluence of events and situations came up last week, Griff, that I think piled on the ultimate heartbreak when Ohtani announced on Saturday that he joined the Dodgers. You and I sat down a week ago and we did an episode, and later that day, or that day itself, we believe that Shohei Ohtani, certainly his representatives, but probably Ohtani as well, was in Dunedin to tour the Blue Jays player development complex. And there were flight tracks that suggested there was a flight from John Wayne Airport in Orange County, California, to Clearwater on the Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening. There was the same flight went back to California Monday afternoon, and then there was another charter flight that left Clearwater for Nashville, which presumably had Ross Atkins and other Blue Jays officials on it. So a lot of people were putting that together on Monday, and we can get to Friday in a moment, but I think you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, where was that information coming from? Because it was never confirmed, because that was part of the deal that clubs have to have a cone of silence about any negotiations with Ohtani. So the fact that it was reported by Ken Rosenthal on Monday morning that on Sunday, or on Tuesday morning, that on Monday, Ohtani was in Dunedin at the complex. If he wasn't on the flight that was coming to Toronto on Friday, then what's to say he was on the flight that was going to Dunedin, to Clearwater, St. Pete on the previous Sunday? My theory, or my feeling, is that there's a strong possibility that it was a CAA private jet, his agency, and that there were people on it from the agency going to negotiate with Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro, and others, and to see the facility, to view the facility, and that sort of, I mean, there's a possibility also, as you point out, that Ohtani was on that flight, because that's what's being recorded. But in light of all the false information that came out about Ohtani and the negotiations and how close the Blue Jays were, and that others were dropping out, and the cone of silence over the whole operation, there's a possibility that it was not Ohtani in Dunedin.
Okay, but do you believe, and this is an opinion question, because again, I don't think any of us are ever going to have 100% of the facts of chronologically what went down here. But do you believe at any point Shohei Ohtani was genuinely interested in the Blue Jays, or do you think this was entirely a leverage play from the get-go? You and I both sat here a week ago, Griff, and said until he signs with a team that is not the Los Angeles Dodgers, I believe, you believe, we believe he will end up a Los Angeles Dodger, and that's what happened. But even my opinion evolved over the course of the week. Maybe I got caught up in some of the reporting. I didn't think he was necessarily going to end up a J, but I thought he was interested. Do you think he was interested? Because if the answer is yes, why wouldn't he want to go see the complex and the facilities that he would be using if he joined the Jays?
I truly believe when this whole process started that every other team than the Dodgers was being considered as an also ran, that the contenders going, or the eventual team going in was the Dodgers. But I do believe that the presentation and the points that Shapiro and Atkins and Rogers in particular were able to present to Ohtani piqued his interest. So if there was another team involved, it would have been the Blue Jays because of the uniqueness of their situation and their offer. So originally, I don't think that they were players, true players in the Ohtani sweepstakes, but I do believe that that they entered that fray with their presentation. And to answer your question as to why he wouldn't fly 5.5, 6 hours to go see the training complex, eventually, if it had gone further, like, why would he have come to Toronto, and which is what everyone believed tracking the flight on Friday? Why would he have come unless it was to have his medicals, to see the city, which he had seen before, to sign a contract, and to find a place to live, which is basically what Hyun-Jin Ryu did back in the winter of 2019 when he signed his $80 million 4-year contract. So, I mean, it made sense if he was on that plane that was the process, but I don't think he would have had to go to Dunedin to see the training complex if he had 2 or 3 negotiating people reporting back to him about what was available, how good it was, and here's what the Blue Jays have made an offer of.
Yeah, so, and we're kind of going chronologically here. We will get to the John Paul Morosi of MLB Network and JP Hornstra, something to do with JP's on Friday, but JP Hornstra of Dodger Nation reporting that Ohtani was either signing with the Jays or was on his way to Toronto, and that's where a lot of the hype and a lot of the frantic Friday came from, and when it kicked in. But in reading Tom Verducci and Ken Rosenthal, John Heyman, Jeff Passan, kind of the big dogs who do this in the aftermath, Griff, I can see where teams that were not the LA Dodgers were led down the primrose path, and I'm willing to play into some of those conspiracy theories, understanding, and we'll talk about all of this, but understanding that this was, is, and always will be a business deal. If everything on Monday felt like it was smelling like lilacs and roses, there was also maybe a dog passing a bit of wind in the garden as well. There was a small stench, and that is, why did this happen on Monday? The winter meetings were underway, and it was going to be obvious to people, most notably the local media covering the Blue Jays, that Ross Atkins was not sitting in a hotel room suite for his daily media availability, which is how this thing is set up at the winter meetings. You go into the room, he's sitting there, and it's kind of this informal, formal conversation while he was on Zoom. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so Ross is obviously not at the Opryland Hotel, which I thought was good fortune for him because that place is just insaneville. But also that would get people talking. And now in hindsight, I'm thinking, Griff, I bet CAA, Ohtani's agency, didn't mind at all that it had kept a prominent general manager in the Ohtani chase out of the Opryland Hotel, out of what ordinarily would have been a usual routine. Where's Ross Atkins? What's his Zoom background? Who's he been talking to? It really got the chatter going. And from an agency perspective, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, the agency, CAA, and the lead agent in the negotiation would not give a rat's ass about the schedule of the Blue Jays media and the general manager. It would all revolve around their client, who is going to be one of the richest athletes ever by the end of this process. So the fact that it was happening while he should have been in at Opryland with a media conference, a local media conference, they didn't care. I did some research on CAA, and they're primarily, they began as a show business, entertainment type representation. And I think that it's a completely different animal than somebody who was your college classmate and became your agent. I mean, these guys are ruthless. Well, not Babe ruthless, just ruthless. And the fact that this all unfolded has nothing to do with what's most convenient for anyone other than Shohei Ohtani and CAA. So it doesn't surprise me that happened, and I do know that there's a clean white wall at the private jet terminal in Clearwater, St. Pete. So that's where he was when Ross Atkins did his media conference on Monday afternoon.
Yeah. So there you go, which fast forwards us to Friday, because really the winter meetings, and I get it. There was frustration at the winter meetings, and you could sense it because Ken Rosenthal was writing about how the baseball's got to get its off season on track here. And I know, quite frankly, we all thought it had done that. I mean, I was at, and you were too. We were at, I don't even know what it's called now. It was Bright House Field at the time, the Philadelphia Phillies spring training stadium in Clearwater, the day that Bryce Harper arrived in early March of 2019, having just signed his massive contract. Like, we forget, only a few years ago now, the major stars weren't getting signed until spring training had begun. Like, and with 2 or 3 weeks into spring training. So this is still ahead of that schedule, but there, and I just thought, okay, like, Rosenthal's among the best in the business, passing, we all know the names, but it's kind of like, Shohei Ohtani, first of all, doesn't owe anybody a schedule here. He can make whatever decision whenever he wants to make it. And this is a major decision in his life. I know it's for outlandish money, but, he's picking, am I going to be living in Los Angeles? Am I going to be living in Toronto or Chicago if the Cubs were in, or San Francisco if I choose the Giants, whatever. Shohei Ohtani didn't owe anybody any decision here. And if there were teams that were feeling frozen because Ohtani was the guy they were chasing, if there were teams that were not the lead dog, i.e. not the Dodgers, who felt frozen by this, well, then you are also within your ability to pivot and turn to Cody Bellinger or turn to whoever, right? Like, I don't understand this notion that Shohei Ohtani somehow owed a particular team, a particular fan base, or the industry in general some kind of timeline here.
Well, what was most surprising to me was that not that that Ohtani and CAA owed anything to any team, but I felt like the players union, the MLBPA felt like the Ohtani situation needed to be resolved to sort of break the dam and allow for trades and allow for other free agent signings. So I thought, if anything, that Ohtani and the agency owed to the rest of their brethren looking for trades, looking for new landing spots. They owed them. So it was a fraternal thing more than an industry thing to me. And that didn't happen. But obviously, the strategy of waiting until Saturday morning, until the ghost flight across the country that supposedly had Ohtani on it and was probably leaked, or it wasn't leaked, but it was allowed to continue falsely by the agency, and then that put final pressure on the Dodgers. And this is the way it's being reported, that on Friday night, after that whole thing went down and it was confirmed that Ohtani had never left his home, that they came up with their final and best offer. And so if it had happened on Monday, maybe it would have been 600 to 650 million. And we just, we go, well, what's 50? But it's 50 million. So what's 50 million between friends? That's a lot of money.
Could be 100.
Yeah, could be 100. But the thing is that they played it the way they felt could maximize the eventual contract bottom line, and it worked perfectly. And whether they manipulated the media, which I do believe, whether that cone of silence they put over everybody, because look at it. The San Francisco Chronicle reported that Ohtani met with the Giants on Saturday before the winter meetings. Did that eliminate them? They could say that we said that anybody who spoke about it would not be considered anymore. So they could use that as the excuse for the Giants being out. The Cubs said, well, nobody's told us, we're out of it. And so is that betraying the silence that was requested?
What about Dave Roberts?
Yeah, well, Dave Roberts already knew that they were the front runner. Somebody would have to cut them off at the knees to change that. So that's why he confidently. I don't agree with what Dave Roberts did. If I was the GM, I'd be pissed. I would have been, and it sounded like he was. But Dave Roberts was obviously an exception because he had been they had closed down Dodger Stadium and given them the tour and felt confident. But
here's the thing. We don't know how information got transferred on Friday. We can only guess. I feel like I'm saying that a lot in this episode, but it is important context. But I'm thinking to myself, so there are two people. J.P. Hornstra, who is a member of the BBWAA, the Baseball Writers Association of America. So he's a credentialed...
Yeah, he's a former beat writer, former legitimate, I think it was LA Times beat writer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I followed him on Twitter a long time ago because he was popping up in my feed, and I'm like, I haven't heard from this guy in a while, and I clicked, yeah, I'm following him. Okay, so he's writing for Dodger Nation now. I don't know if that's a site that he's launched himself or if it's something he joined after probably getting laid off because our industry is in such awesome shape. And then there's John Morosi, who, I used to talk to weekly when I worked in the mainstream, and always very cordial, always very nice. And my first thought after word came out from Bob Nightingale, John Heyman, and others that Ohtani was not on the flight to Toronto on Friday was that, what's the angle? What's the angle for some media types? Is it, I get a piece of information, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to gamble here and take a chance, and if I'm right, then I'm right, and I'm the guy who got it, and if I'm wrong, then I'm going to have to walk it back. And what's the gain? There's a lot of traction. There's probably an increase in followers, but there's also a lot of egg on your face if you get it wrong. Typically, you want to have two sources. So, Griff, somebody tells you something. It may be very trusted, but you also want to verify with at least one other person so that, okay, so now I've talked to two or three people. The stories are the same. I feel very confident in what I've been told being true. I don't see, and they use sources, they put an S on the end of the word, but I don't see where the secondary or tertiary source would be here. I am guessing it felt to me like CAA or the agent himself who is Ohtani's agent in CAA, Naz Bolello, is calling up Heyman or not Heyman, Morosi or Hornstra or both, saying Shohei's getting on a flight today. And here's the thing, we'll never know because you don't burn sources because you'll never have them again if you burn them. So it's not like Morosi and Hornstra can come out and say, here's how I got this bad piece of info. So did those two guys get used is what I'm wondering.
Well, yes. I think that if you get information from a team or from the agency that's involved, that's the only source that a lot of not just baseball media, but sports media go with. You go with it because it comes from the most reliable source. And
the horse's mouth, as they say. It
leaves open the possibility of being burned and being used. If you get it from another agent or from someone on the periphery of a club front office, then you definitely need to go and find a second source, a third source, reliable, more reliable than that. But the information arrived on your desk, on your laptop, and then it's up to you to go out and confirm it with another source. But when it's different when it comes from the agency or from a ball club itself. And it's the same in, I would assume, most sports, all sports. And I think that's what happened, is that the one source that Morosi and Rosenthal about the flight to Dunedin on the previous Sunday that they got was from one of those sources. CAA about Ohtani being on a flight. The fact that they didn't deny it, didn't call Morosi and say, hey, he's not on that flight. They were very happy that this false information was going out there and was being picked up by a giant Blue Jays fan base who were willing to run with it, because the reliable sources that they have are those media members that traditionally break stories.
Yeah. And as Tom Verducci, I think it was, wrote in Sports Illustrated, the Dodgers didn't actually believe Ohtani was on that flight to Toronto, but they also didn't want to screw around. And quite possibly, Griff, somewhere in the $50 to $100 million range. Because I'm thinking, if I'm Andrew Friedman, Brandon Gomes, I'm in that Dodgers front office, I've been through every scenario, permutation with ownership, and we know that the Dodgers have endless money in that ownership. That's a massive investment conglomerate. It's wild. They probably knew they could push it. I would argue they probably could have pushed it even higher if they had to. But maybe on Friday they said, okay, we gotta come up with a number here that will satisfy Shohei, that we're pretty sure no other team can match, and then take it to Shohei's people and say, look, 700 over 10, we'll figure out how to allocate the dollars now versus deferred. This is the number. You either want to be here or you don't. And they look at that and say, we know we're not getting more than 700 from anybody else. He wants to be in Los Angeles, always has, always will. Pen to paper, it's over.
the last time that the Dodgers outbid nobody but paid way too much with no competition was Kevin Brown, and it was at the Opryland. They gave some huge offer at the time to Kevin Brown, and then people started investigating, and there were nobody else even close to that number. And Kevin Malone was the GM of the Dodgers at the time, and that sort of set his reputation back a little bit. But it was at the same hotel, ironically, coincidentally. But I think that what tells you that Ohtani really wanted to be a Dodger is it seems like it was his suggestion that let's see how much we can defer to the back end of this so that you guys can afford it. I mean, that's what it's sounding like now, is that Ohtani came up with the mass deferral suggestion, which makes me think that was his preferred landing spot.
Yeah, not that you can afford it, but so that you can continue to supplement the team around me, so that I'm not playing for the Angels again.
Which just putting a wrap on that. Now we get back to the Blue Jays, who all of a sudden don't have Juan Soto as a target, and they probably feel like they could have put a package together. But I think the Yankees preempted that by realizing if they waited until Ohtani signed, then they would end up having to include Michael King and all the prospects that the Padres had been demanding. So if they were going to wait until Ohtani signed and maybe miss out on that, let's just send them the package they want and then bring Soto.
Yeah, well, they knew.
So the Blue Jays ended up missing out on that. Now they have, and this is going to be the perception, that the Blue Jays have $600 million sitting in their pockets to be spent. Now, this is just a suggestion, but what if they negotiated with both Vlad and Bo? The maximum that those guys would be getting, I would think, would be 10 years, $300 million. Does that make sense? That's $600 million total.
Somebody wrote
your two top stars.
Yeah, somebody seemed to suggest or theorize, or to quote R.A. Dickey, opinionize that you didn't catch that I made up the word there.
You faded out a second. Well,
R.A. Dickey once said opinionize.
Oh, okay.
R.A. Dickey. R.A. Dickey once said, I don't want to opinionize on.
Oh, okay. Well, that was probably a word that he used in his book. Yeah. So, as he was crossing the mighty Mississippi.
But that Corey Seager is the baseline contract for Bo Bichette. And I'm just like, okay, I'm a fan of Bo's. I don't think we're there yet, please. Can we just sort of take a deep breath? I am in that $300 mindset with you, Griff. I think Corey Seager is a better player than Bo Bichette right now. And can I be very clear when I say that? That is not me saying Bo Bichette is a bad baseball player. Bo Bichette is an excellent baseball player. Corey Seager is better, because there aren't many players who are better than Corey Seager when Seager is healthy, and that's been proven. So, yeah, it's just, are you 100%?
It's a place to start. I mean, you can start now.
Are you 100% convinced? 100% convinced, Griff? I'm going to package them together here. We can break it down individually if you want. Are you 100% convinced that the path forward in the organization's eyes today is Vlad and Bo, long term?
I would, if I was sitting in that GM's chair, that would be what I would be looking at. I mean, you spent a lot of time and a lot of effort and maybe lucked into signing Vlad and drafting Bo, but you have them. You have them, and they're 24 and 25 years old. And you can trade one for some players that haven't developed, but you already have one. And I think that Vlad and Bo in this market would be worth holding on to and building around. And talking about Seager and Bo, like, I'm sure there's a lot of actors in Hollywood that say I'm half as good as Robert De Niro, so I want half his money, and that's not happening. You remain an extra in one of Robert De Niro's movies, and you could be the best extra actor in the world, but you're not getting anywhere near that kind of money. So, I mean, relating it to Ohtani, I don't think that his $700 million is going to drag everybody up that scale because he's unique.
Right.
He's a pitcher.
True unicorn.
DH. Yeah. I hate that word, but use it. Go ahead. We might even use it. We might even use it in the title of this bit.
I'm just concerned, Griff, that when he comes to Toronto, he might have not just one horn on his forehead, but horns coming out the side of his head here. Is he suddenly the devil?
I'm going to be tracking that flight from DC, the Dodgers charter, on the 25th of April, because I know he'll be on that one.
Oh, he'll definitely be on that one. But, like, I look at this, fans, or at least the online portion of the fan base, they're heartbroken, Griff. And I get that 100%. I mean, this guy's a special player, so different, than any player we've witnessed in our lifetimes. But on the flip side of that coin, and I'm now stepping aside from my comment about the fan base, because people care, and that's good. This was strictly a business decision. And we don't even know how caught up Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins got in this. I'm sure they were riding mountains and valleys, peaks and valleys along the way, thinking maybe we got, the inside track. Okay, maybe we're on the outside looking in, but we'll just see how this plays out. This was strictly a business decision. And I think fans can be mad at Naz Bolello and CAA if, as you and I theorize, a couple of media guys got used. A couple of legit media guys got used and threw it out there on Friday that Shohei was flying to Toronto, and that ultimately was nothing more than a bargaining chip to get the Dodgers to jump and increase their offer so that the deal could get done, so that they could hit the finish line. But, the company that owns the Toronto Blue Jays is big business, one of the big entities in our country. And this is business, man. This is business. And I do not feel an iota of sympathy for the company losing out, because the company would do this to its own employees. The company will do what it takes to increase its revenue, to enhance its bottom line, to improve the return to shareholders. Shohei Ohtani's people did what they had to do to maximize what he ultimately will be taking home on this contract with the LA Dodgers. I get it. Sports organizations are civic trusts in a way because they have so many people like us who are invested in terms of energy, and we spend our money to go watch these games. But at the end of the day, this is business. This is business for the player, and it's business for the companies that own, or people that own, these teams.
In terms of your original premise, anyone who was watching from the winter meetings, not Monday because Ross Atkins wasn't there, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe a little Thursday, anyone watching Ross Atkins was suggesting that his body language, he was so relaxed and smiling and so cavalier about things, that showed that the Blue Jays were going to sign Shohei Ohtani, and that Ross Atkins was confident. I had the opposite feeling, that this was a business decision. This was above his pay scale, and he was just repping Rogers in the room with the Ohtani people. And so he had no part in the success or failure of this. It didn't matter to him because it was not his decision. It wasn't a baseball decision. It was a business decision. So that's why, to me, he seemed more relaxed than we've seen him in a media setting in a long time. That he would go along with it. He would try his best to negotiate, to be the front man to negotiate an Ohtani deal for the next 10 to 12 years, to work for Rogers and to play baseball for the Blue Jays, but it wasn't his decision. That was my reading on it. But to your premise, it was a business decision more than a baseball decision.
Right.
Because,
and it's
consider the fact that as a DH in 2024, he would be stepping out of the dugout 5 times per game, 5 or 6 times max per game, not playing the field. So the 40,000 fans in attendance would see the unicorn perform 5 times over a 3-hour period. Now you compare that to LeBron James and his 35 to 38 minutes per game. You compare that to Connor McDavid and his 23 to 25 minutes of ice time. And in baseball, if you're just a DH, it's hard to say that you're worth $70 million, even for that 1 year, even if he's going to become a pitcher in 2025. I mean, it just is a difficult sell to strictly a baseball person to say that this guy with his 5 plate appearances per game is going to win you a World Series championship. But I know I know it affects the lineup up and down, and it affects the enthusiasm at the ballpark and in the clubhouse. But, it could be a difficult sell when you're reaching those levels of pay.
Right. But with Ohtani, I think selling those premium seats.
Well, that's why we're talking about it being a business decision.
Right. Would it become easier? And Griff, I'm telling you, if the Jays had landed Shohei Ohtani, you would have been able to make fart noises on TV for 3 hours during Jays games, and the eyeballs would have been through the roof. The viewership would have been through the roof. And now coming off, and look, I don't hold not getting Ohtani against Mark Shapiro or Ross Atkins or anybody, really. I mean, because the player's a free agent, so it's his choice. The fact that they were in it is a good thing. And quite frankly, given the annual revenue and quarterly profits of the company that owns the Toronto Blue Jays, they should be in. And they should be in on the next great player. It'll be different than Ohtani, but the next great player that follows as well. But the fact is, there's no Ohtani. And when you combine the rage and anger that the fans had at this team, that I think really, I mean, setting aside the Barrios thing, that was kind of the rotten cherry on the dirty whipped cream. But fans turned on that team in the Texas Rangers series in early September, particularly on the final 2 nights of the 4-game sweep, when they didn't just lose the games, they got obliterated. I interpreted that as a message to the front office and to the message of the culture. Now you have the disappointment of the end of the 2023 season, combined with the fact that Shohei Ohtani didn't end up a Blue Jay, which again is nobody's fault individually, but perception and reality can be 2 different things. Now you got some TV executives who can't just walk around yelling at people, as some are wont to do, and now they've actually got to get creative and put a product out there that balances appropriate hype with, fingers crossed, team results in 2024. Because there is not a good vibe around this team, regardless of how much of good vibe is going to be sold heading into March.
Yeah, I'm not concerned. And I learned early on over my 51 years in the game, I am not concerned about the rage, the moment of rage expressed by fans because of things that happen in the industry or with a specific team. I think back to 1981, the strike, the strike that lasted 48, 49 days, I think 51 before they got back on the field. And the number of fans who said, I will never go to another baseball game, I will never watch. And eventually, not even eventually, in a short period of time, they came back because the game pulled them back in. 19 more work stoppages and vitriol during the later 80s, the strike in 94, people saying, I'll never come back, I'll never come back. And then you look at what happened in 2015, 2016, and from that moment on, in terms of fans returning to the ballpark, enjoying the product. This is their team. It's a new generation. So I'm not concerned about fans who are upset with the fact of Ohtani signing with the Dodgers, nor am I upset, nor am I worried about the fans that are talking about Berrios being lifted after 12 hitters. Hopefully John Schneider learned a lesson from that, and that won't happen again. I think the game is sort of, with the rule changes, is developing, and players are learning how to handle it. I think that what will bring fans back, and it might even be before spring training this year, is what happens in the next 3 weeks. I think the Jays can't stand pat and go into February without replacing 3 of those missing offensive pieces. And I think, when you look at the end of the season, the end of the season, how it turned out, I don't think anybody at that time was considering, well, now we can go get Ohtani. I think the Ohtani thing snuck up on everybody, surprised everyone, and then they got caught up in it. But if you take that entire Ohtani episode out, fans were optimistic that they could fill some of those spots, 3 of the 4 spots, third base, DH, second base, and 1 outfield spot, because the pitching staff is still strong, sturdy, deep. So if you take the Ohtani thing out of the equation, you have a team that would have spent the winter trying to do what they are going to do before spring training starts. And the rage, the outrage, I think, will dissipate. And then I just see it as something that happens all the time in pro sports, in baseball. And I'm not that concerned about the Blue Jays trying to win back their fans, because it's just a natural thing.
But you gotta have a good first couple months to the next season, Griff, because it is not. I'm telling you, it's not going to take much for those feelings to bubble up. Those feelings exist, and I, in the lead up to Ohtani's decision, I would think about all the ramifications and the possibilities. And I'm like, if they land Ohtani, is that something that Shapiro and Atkins can live off of for another 3 or 4 years, for example? Right? I mean, even if you only win 88 to 90 games and you sneak into the playoffs or just miss, well, we landed the big fish and we've got 9 more years with him, even though the first year didn't go great. Now, I mean, this is a team with a very good pitching staff. I'll give you that. Some very good young players like Vlad and Bo are at the top of the list, right? And then there are arguably some guys who could have better years in 2024 than they had in 2023. But for all the talk about draft and development and process, I mean, this is a team right now with a bottom third farm system. And I know they've made the playoffs in more years than not over the last half decade, but like a team like the Los Angeles Dodgers has been in the playoffs for more than a decade straight, and they've got, I don't even know if it's a top third farm system. It might even be a top quarter, like a top 5, top 6 farm system in Major League Baseball. So there's, they're kind of on a precipice here, and they got to have a strong 2024, or there's some serious decisions with Bo and Vlad coming up only on free agency, only 1 year away. And who do you want to take this organization forward? Setting aside fan range, fan upset, whatever, 2024 is going to be pivotal for where this organization goes beyond next season. Pivotal.
Well, I mean, when you look at, and we've discussed on Exit Philosophy before about my sort of reluctance to see Ohtani sign it, and we were talking $50 million a year, because I mean, I looked at Trout and Ohtani, and what did that produce? In fact, the year that Ohtani debuted with the Angels, they went up 4,000 in attendance, and then the next year went up 80,000, and they were already over 3 million. And then after the pandemic, they went down to 1.6 and really never got it back. And they didn't win. They were like 86 games below 500 in the 6 years of Trout and Ohtani together. Okay, yeah, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Ohtani. Okay, that's a pretty good team right there. But I was concerned that the Blue Jays would then, as you point out, go for 2 or 3 years, go, hey, we got our guy. Now let's go. Let's see what we got, and the farm system would not be churning people into the system like it did with the Rangers, which allowed them to win the World Series. I mean, they had a third baseman and an outfielder who snuck up on everybody and really were a pivotal part of a World Series team. But I think that the Blue Jays can take advantage or be better as a team on the field with Ohtani not taking up all that oxygen. That's just my thought.
Yeah,
and that they can now decide what they need to build going down the road. And if they feel it's Bo and Vlad, then they can negotiate seriously without all that money being tied up in Ohtani.
Yeah, whether it was Ohtani or Soto,
Soto was a 1-year deal, so that wouldn't have been as impactful.
I understand, but I'm talking about on-field influence, not just in terms of where they probably both of them would hit number 2 in the lineup. They would both be a left-handed hitter. We know that. And they would both be on base all the time.
Right.
And they both take really good plate appearances. And for me, it's the influence that you have on the first inning by virtue of the fact that you're getting on base 40% of the time. In Soto's case, even more. It's like 42, 43% of the time. And the influence that can have on the guys who follow you in the order because they're coming up more early in the game with a runner on base and coming up more in general with at least one runner on base. And also the influence you can have behind the scenes in helping some guys with their plate approaches. And so that's where a large amount of the appeal. I know the Soto and Ohtani situations are very different in terms of club control and money owed and term of deal and all of that stuff. But I just think those sorts of players with those sorts of offensive approaches and the fact they hit left-handed and would hit in the top 30-year order are very appealing to me. I'm not overly excited about the notion of a Springer, Bichette, Vladdy 1, 2, 3. Again.
Yeah, I mean the Springer thing is when he signed the free agent deal, it was with the understanding that he was one of the great leadoff hitters in the game, and I don't think they're going to move him. They'd be very reluctant to move him full time out of that leadoff spot. But I do think that they need a number 2 hitter that has more patience, that was either Soto or Ohtani. Can Cody Bellinger take a pitch? Is he potentially? But
we've called his name here before.
There were too many innings that were done in 10 pitches or less against the Blue Jays because you can say when Bo gets to 2 strikes, he really works at bat, he grinds in at bat, but his bat to ball skills are such that if he's aggressive early in the count, a lot of times he's putting that ball in play on the first or second pitch. And now Bo or Vlad, if he doesn't have anyone hitting behind him like Bo, and I'm suggesting that Bo should bat 4th next year and that Vlad should bat 3rd and that they should find a really competent second place hitter who grinds like we're suggesting the 2 guys that they missed out on. But yeah, I mean, Vlad, without anybody behind him, he gets in these funks where he's swinging at sliders just off the plate, 6 inches off the plate, then gets frustrated with himself, gets called on a strike that's 2 inches off the plate, and that makes him go reaching for more pitches that are off the plate. And if he has Bo behind him, it's protecting him because nobody wants to put Vlad on base with Bo coming up. That's as simple as that. So the top four would work itself out if they could find a number two offensive weapon that plays the outfield.
Yeah. I mean,
like Cody Bellinger.
Yeah. And
but they're going to have to aim high now because of the two losses that they've had. They can't just go out there and sign Eddie Rosario or somebody.
Or Ahmed Rosario. Yeah. The one thing I'll say is that I've never gotten the sense that Ross Atkins is an overly emotional guy. And if what you said earlier is in fact true, Griff, where he, look, this is way above my pay grade. Shohei Ohtani is obviously a major baseball decision, but also a major business decision. And I'm just a cog in the wheel here taking part. Well, maybe he can emotionally divorce himself from the disappointment even quicker and then get to work on the pivot.
I think he will. I think
because they've got to.
I think that's the case.
Yeah, and I always used to say when I do my radio guest spots in the middle of winter and the roster hadn't been rounded out because the off season wasn't over yet, I said, look, let's assess this thing in spring training. Let's let them put the finishing pieces on their roster before we make declarations. And I'm going to hold true to that today. This right now, and they don't have a third baseman, and they're unclear at second base, and they're lacking one of the corner outfield spots. We just named 3 spots in the batting order that need to be addressed. So in saying what I'm about to say, I'm acknowledging that, and I'm not making a judgment on where this is all going. But this today is not a playoff team.
And to me, making a judgment on December 11th is like reading War and Peace and ending after reading about war and trying to review the book.
Actually, I'm getting into the Elaine Bennis. Actually, Tolstoy, the initial title of the book was War.
What is it good for?
It was Lippman was in the limousine. Shut up, Elaine. That was not the... Oh, you Americans. Remember Testikov? Anyway, I took you totally off track.
Somehow we always get a Seinfeld reference in the exit philosophy, which I love.
Yuri Testikov, what a character. Oh, you Americans with your sneakers always running from something.
but I mean, we're in agreement there is that we'll be doing more exit philosophies during the off season, and there may be changes, hopefully, that we'll be able to talk about them heading into January and as January unfolds. But to do it on December 11th and say that this team is in trouble and the fan base isn't going to get over it, and it's a little early for that. All we can do is talk about what we would recommend, what just happened, which is what we did with the Ohtani situation. And there's a lot of logic, but a lot of rage to how that unfolded. But there's nothing that fans can do about it except pay attention, look forward to opening day, and make their social media recommendations known.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the Ohtani thing's far different than the Barrios thing in Game 2. Like, that was an organization thing and a decision. Ohtani was a free agent. He was going where he wanted to go, and he was ultimately going to make that decision, and it was good that the Jays were in the race for him. I understand people are upset because there were a couple of reports from reputable BBWAA members. John Paul Morosi has had a footprint in Toronto on local radio and local TV, maybe national TV. But local radio and national TV for a long time. And so you read that, you hear that, and you say, oh my God, he really is Ohtani on an airplane coming to Toronto right now. What could that mean? People got duped, and then there's pain that goes with that. The reporters may have been duped by the agency, which ended up getting Ohtani more money from a Dodgers team that didn't necessarily believe he was on the flight, but may have panicked and said, okay, we got to bring this to an end because we don't need this dragging on and actually legitimately running the risk of losing him. And so people end up feeling burned. But Again, I'll come back to my message from earlier, which is from Shohei Ohtani's position, good for him to maximize the dollars he can get. Good for him, because the more players who can do that, they are the product, the better. And on the other side, and I'm speaking specifically of the ownership of the Toronto Blue Jays, business is cutthroat, business is nasty, honesty is not nearly often enough a part of the game. And if anybody in that company feels duped, sorry, man, it's business. It's business.
To me,
we've all learned it's business.
To me, the Dodgers came to the same conclusion that the Yankees did when the Yankees reached out and pulled the trigger on the Soto deal, is that if we wait, it can only get worse. So let's make the max offer for Soto, give them what they asked for, because if other people come into the market, it could get worse. And the Dodgers reached the same conclusion. It could have been 600, and they went to 7, saying that that's as high as we could go. And let's not let the Blue Jays continue to be in this picture. So let's just bump it to 7. Could have been 650 that they had to go. The bar they had to go over could be 675. But, whatever it was, the Dodgers wanted to put an end to that. And the pressure that was put on them by the agency and by Ohtani perhaps being on a flight and then not being on a flight. But that led them to, let's get this over with. Let's just do it. And they did it. And so everybody's moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, your 49ers did a hell of a job again. Like, their offense is just unbelievably relentless.
Yeah, they had no rhythm offensively against the Seahawks on Sunday, Griff, but they bombed them for big plays. And so it was a different game that way, where usually it's, I mean, they can blow the top off a defense, and Brock Purdy has shown that repeatedly, but that was really all yesterday was. They never really got into any of those 10 to 12 to 14 play, 80-yard offensive drives that grind 10 minutes off the clock. They just took the top off repeatedly. McCaffrey had that major 72-yard gain on the first play. So they look great. Dallas destroyed Philadelphia last night, and it really feels, as we work our way well into December now, that the 49ers and Cowboys are on a pretty significant collision course for a playoff game, whether it be in the second round or the NFC Championship.
Oh, yeah, and standings-wise, hopefully they won't have to meet until the NFC Championship game. That would be ideal. And where it is would be the only question up in the air. Either place would be a great game. But my pick of the week for next weekend, I mean, I was very impressed with the Seahawks backup quarterback. What, Lock?
Your guy, Drew Lock? Drew Lock's your guy?
Drew Lock. And he was good enough against any other team than the 49ers. I mean, he was throwing the ball to spots. He seemed to have a relationship going with DK Metcalf, who needs somebody to be stroking him and throwing him the ball all the time. I would go large on the weekend with points, without points, just to win a game with the Seahawks. But that's my pick of the week coming up. Goodness.
So they're hosting the Eagles on Monday night next week.
Oh, I'll take the points.
There you go. Okay. So I'm going to suggest, and we'll see how it plays out, but I'm going to suggest you might not have been the first person on the planet to fall for Drew Lock, because the Denver Broncos did.
I watched him in college. I go with that far back. He was awesome.
Okay. All right. Okay, but because he was a Broncos pick, right, and was included in the deal for Russell Wilson. He's a bit of a gunslinger, but unlike Brett Favre, has a tendency at times to throw it to the other team. Well, Favre did as well, but was able to compensate for that by throwing it to his team 3 or 4 times more than to the other team. But you never know. When I saw it was Drew Lock yesterday, the Niners have handled Geno Smith pretty well, but when I saw it was Drew Lock, I thought this has a bit of a, I want to say a trap game feel to it, but Niners are back home. after a massive win on the other side of the country the week before. There's been a lot of travel this year because of their opponents. So they went to Jacksonville. They've been to Philadelphia. They've gone east a lot. Like the miles logged, both them and the Seahawks are a lot. And I figured, well, the Niners might be a little tired or a little cobwebby. And even though they still covered the spread. 12-point win.
They got so many weapons, it's unbelievable. But how about my Bears?
The Bears.
I might parlay the Bears and the Seahawks with the points.
Griff, if you and I ever have another night like we did at Steph's in San Francisco, I will just, we'll be that deep. It'll be closing time. We'll say, Griff, say Eberflus 10 times fast.
Steph's is no more.
Yeah,
walking up the hill, it's done.
R.I.P.
Chairs are on the counter. Steph's not there, but
just on your Bears.
Yeah,
I still think you got to get a quarterback in the draft because you're going to have the first overall pick because Carolina's going to finish dead last. I think you draft a quarterback who projects to be better than Justin Fields, and then that resets your quarterback contract, and you got a quarterback on a rookie contract for the next 4 years, which allows you to spend more elsewhere. And theoretically, Caleb Williams ends up being a better all-around quarterback than Justin Fields. And you trade Fields, you get draft capital in return, and somebody else can pay Justin Fields big money. That's my theory.
How about if you draft a quarterback, bring him in, and make Fields a running back? Then you got a situation like Ron Lancaster and Russ Jackson in Saskatchewan or in Ottawa.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm trying to kill a fly here, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm doing. Success. I feel like we're at Steph's.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we've reached Justin Fields is a running back,
that may be a sign that this episode needs to be wrapped up.
If we're at Justin Fields as a running back point of the conversation, then we might be trying to say Eberflus 10 times fast.
You got 3/4. If you got 3/4 on you, we'll shoot a game of pool before we go to the hotel.
There you go. So listen, Christmas is in 2 weeks because we're talking to you on Monday, December the 11th. So we'll set it up here, Griff, as we get into the holiday season. I am obviously traveling with my laptop. I'm traveling with my microphone. I'll bring the ring light back to the greater Toronto area because I'm leaving for the GTA by car tomorrow to spend the holidays with family and friends. So Jays make a move or make moves, we'll definitely be all over it. And you can get us at youtube.com/exit philosophy. You can watch us on youtube.com/exit philosophy, and we will go live. And meanwhile, Griff is still pumping out the columns, including sort of an Ohtani wrap-up that he put out this morning at griffsthepitch.com. So there's some great conversations with current and former Blue Jays and former Montreal Expos. You'll love those. And still multiple columns each week, including one today at griffsthepitch.com.
So that's about it.
An episode.
We will. As Scotty said, we will be available, and we'll probably do one more before Christmas. And if there's a major deal, we'll be there for that. So, thanks for listening, and have a safe drive, Scotty.
Thank you, and happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends, and enjoy where we are now, which is sort of the launch of the holiday season. We'll chat soon.